We have hit the go live button. We have people in the chat. Yay! Alrighty. We have people waiting. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. Oh, I see my mouse is in the way of my face there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. So I guess we should start this week with a little bit of announcement. So we've actually trimmed down the class a little bit. I know initially we said it was going to be 13 classes. We've actually trimmed it down into 10. So this is going to be the final class. And we wanted to thank everyone for sticking with us through this. Natalia has just been this amazing font of knowledge and experience for us to draw from. So thank you so much, Natalia. Obviously, thank you guys for watching and for joining us and coming back week after week with your great questions. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about line art and tones, which is sort of the final steps you're going to want to take on your artwork to get it ready for your comic. And then towards the end, very briefly, we're going to talk about the final steps to take on how to get your comic to a publisher or how to upload it, whatever you want to do with it when it's finalized. So Natalia, why don't you go ahead and get us started? Oh, Natalia, I apologize. People can't hear you, which is no good. We had this problem last time. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can figure out some more stuff that I gotta do here. Obviously, what's going on here? I swear, you would think after 10 sessions that we would have this down, and yet every time it seems like it changes itself. All right, let's see. Audio output, maybe? Let's give this a try. All right, guys, Natalia, can you speak a little bit and see if people can hear you? Yeah, we definitely need to hear you. Just waiting in chat, waiting for the live stream to catch up for people. Let's see. I guess not. No one said anything yet. All right, let me keep playing around with this. Nope, still can't hear you. Let's see, one more time. How about this? Let's see. This is the problem with the live stream delay. We have a 20-second delay. We just sort of dance around a little bit. Have a little dance. Still nothing? Okay, let's see. I wonder why. Okay, let's see. What's going on with this? Oh, let's see. Maybe this.
Okay.
All right. Let's give this
a
try. Let's give this a try. I think I might have fixed it. We're gonna try this. We're gonna see if this
works now. Can you hear me now?
It is not a Manga Masterclass live stream without 10 minutes of technical troubleshooting at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's hope. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Yay!
it worked!
We did it! Oh my gosh!
Great!
Thank you so much, guys!
Hello, everyone!
Yay! We got there. Okay, let's take it away again.
Yes, let's start. Okay, so what I was saying when you weren't listening, or you couldn't hear me, is this episode is gonna be like a complete, like the final episode, and we've gone through all these lessons, which you don't have to watch all of them to watch this one. If Lineart and tones is what you're focusing on right now, and that's what you need help with, this episode is gonna be like a final episode for that only, and we're gonna do it digitally. So, but if you want to talk more, or if you want to see the other lessons, I recommend you to go back and watch them, because we talk about a lot of great things in there, and some of them connects to this episode. So I'm gonna refer to some of them in this episode as well. But you don't have to watch them, but it's good if you do. And also, I want to also recommend you to watch especially the first episode, because in the first episode we talked about tools, and especially if you want to work traditionally with traditional manga tools, such as screen tones on paper, like the sticky ones, or if you want to use traditional manga nib pens that you dip in ink. So you don't have to watch that episode, but I'm gonna refer to it and talk about it. So in that episode, I talked about those tools, and I think I might have mentioned that we're gonna show some of them, but I think it's better I show the digital, because I think most of you will be working with digital manga in the future. So this is much more cheaper in many ways. We're gonna use this program called Clip Studio Paint. And this is the EX version, so it's the full version. There's also a Pro version, which is a little bit cheaper. The reason why I use the EX version, I'm going to show you soon. But the reason why I use this program is because it is made for us. It's made for us manga artists. So it has all the tools and everything that you see your professional, like the professional manga artists or your idols from Japan, they're using those tools, and this program imitates all of those tools. So that's why we're going to talk about this program. But if you want to see some of the tools that are used in the traditional manga making process, then episode 1 or the lesson 1 is the one you're gonna need to check out. We show some of them there. Yeah, let's start.
Okay, and of course, as always, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Oh, we just had a bunch popped up right then. And yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. And of course, if there's anything at the end of the classes you think, oh man, I wish I could have asked this, or I wish they'd gone over this, you can always still email us. We will still be here to answer your questions. The email address is in the description, but it's kae@tokyopop.com. So my name at tokyopop.com. So we have a question here from Vibath Poneru saying, do we have to use screen tones since people like Takehiko Inoue don't use much of them? Is it preference or necessary?
I'm going to talk about that. That's a good question, so I'm going to bring up that during the episode, what you shouldn't use tones for. And of course, you don't have to, especially a lot of vintage manga, like if you're mostly reading mangas from the 50s, 60s, 70s, those don't have any screen tones. Like tones were pretty much a thing that like was discovered or popped up or became a norm during the 80s and 90s in manga. So a lot of old manga, and if you're inspired by those, they don't use screen tones. Every technique there in that manga is drawn by a hand. So and I'm gonna talk more about screen tones, what's the point of it and how it works. So that's one thing I'm gonna talk about in this episode.
Right.
And yeah, do's and don'ts. So I put the email address here on the screen if you want to use it, and you can always jump back in the lesson to see it. Let's start.
Thanks, Natalia.
And yes, this episode I will not talk about my manga Sword Princess, which is this one.
I know I had to crop it out a little bit there, but yes, now everyone can see it.
Yes. So Sword Prince of Maltea is my manga. If you want to buy it, I recommend you to support non-Japanese artists. So this one is available on Amazon by TOKYOPOP. And if you want to support me, that's one way. I really like it. And if we ever meet in a convention, I can sign it for you, of course. But I'm not going to talk about this one in this episode because this one was actually I drew all the pages by hand, and I laid the screen tones digitally. So this one is digitally screen toned, but it's drawn by hand. That means it's a little bit different process. I wanted to show you how I make a manga completely digitally in this program in Clip Studio Paint. So I'm not going to show Amalthea because this is a little bit of another process, but I have made another manga in Clip Studio Paint completely, and that one is called Runebound. It's my competition entry for the Tezuka Manga Award, which is a competition that has been, the deadline was this summer, and it's still in like the process of selecting winners right now. So I don't know. I am not sure what's gonna happen. So let's see what happens. But this one was for so it's Tezuka Award is for the Shonen Jump magazine. So it's a shonen or like adventure shonen manga. And that's why I'm going to use this as an example. And this is why you see the whole manga series here, all the pages. I'm going to show you here because I want to jump between the pages and show you how to use inking or line art and tones for different situations. And in this one as well, I also want to show you the reason why it's good to have the EX version of Clip Studio Paint. It's because you can make this. In the Pro version, which is the cheaper one, you cannot put the whole manga in one file like this. But in the EX version, you can work with the manga as like a complete series like this, which means it's easier for me to jump between pages. And if I make one page and then on the next page is going to be the same character, I can jump between these pages easily, and then I can even make like spreads and everything, and then move the pages around. And this can actually become even a print file that I can make like a PDF file or something. So I think there's a lot of reasons why you should get EX. And personally, like I have lived through the Photoshop era where like Photoshop were the standards for us manga artists or comic artists. And I promise you think that Clip Studio Paint is expensive. Go watch some of like how much it costs to pay for some of the Adobe programs, and you're gonna definitely pay for this one. Like I'm not selling, like we are not supported by Clip Studio Paint, like money-wise. This is not a supported ad. I'm just telling you, sure, you can think it's expensive, but there's so many more expensive programs, and this is quite affordable in comparison to others. But
I will
the reason
jump
why
in
I
and
like
say,
yeah.
it's also like it is a standard. Natalia is not kidding.
Yeah.
Most of our artists work
Yeah.
through Clip Studio Paint, and obviously when we need revisions, that makes it a lot easier for the artist to go
Yeah.
back in and make those revisions to then export it
Yes.
as a PDF or as layered files. It's hugely helpful. And we're not sponsored by Clip Studio Paint. This is not a paid ad, but we've talked to these guys as a publisher.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have we've spoken with them at conventions. We see them at shows, and they're wonderful. They're so helpful. They're really supportive of new artists and like professional artists that have been doing this for decades. They're just a really great, solid program and a great company backing it. So honestly, if you're gonna invest in something, I would say this should be right at the highest priority for you as an artist.
Yeah. So yeah, the program Clip Studio Paint is it's called Manga Studio in Japan, and it has become one of the leading manga digital manga making tool for Japanese manga artists. So there is even professional manga artists that work in this program, and this is the American or the English version, because there's more languages in this one, I think, but it's the non-Japanese version. Sure. I think actually there's a Japanese version of Clip Studio Paint as well, but I'm not sure. So anyway, this story, by the way, it's it's actually available to read if you want to. And Kae, you're gonna put in the description
I
a
am.
link.
Yes.
It's not up there yet, but if you're watching this as like watching it later, there's gonna be a link in the description for this manga. And if you want to read it and analyze each frame a little bit more closely, I'm just gonna jump between some pages. So if you feel like, oh, this is gonna I can't stop and watch it closely, then I recommend you to go to the link in the description. That's gonna be in the description, and read the manga, and then you can stop and analyze each page.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I read it.
Thank you.
Very good. It's wonderful. And you know what? This is a great time to emphasize something that we said much earlier. Remember, guys, we keep beating this into you that you need an editor. You need to rely on editors. You need to rely on people's opinions. Natalia brought this to me before she submitted it and said, listen, can I ask your opinion? Can you look at this? And as a friend, can you tell me what you think? And I came back and I said, I had a question about a certain character's motivations, and she and I went back and forth a little bit, and we figured out, by changing, like, what was it, one line? It was something so small.
Yeah.
In the text, we were like, boom, that's it, it fixed it. And it was, it was such a simple thing, and it's so important.
Helpful, super helpful.
Yeah, to be able to rely on people, especially because if you think about it, when you're looking at your comic, you're almost zoomed all the way in. You're looking at it like so tiny. It's the whole thing about not seeing the forest for the trees. Sometimes you need someone to come in and say, hey, there's a whole forest around you right now. And sometimes getting that additional perspective is good, even when you're already a professional published manga artist. Yeah. You've got to be able to do that.
That's why I think it's very important to have editors and beta readers. I call them beta readers, test readers, people that you trust, or people that are part of, like, it doesn't have to be people you know, as long as they are kind of part of the target audience.
Yeah.
So if you think that your sister's daughter might be, or your cousin might be a perfect target, then that person should read it.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about line art now. I'm going to jump in on some of these pages, and I'm going to show you some good tips about line arting. So in this program, as you can see, if I click on one page, I can still see the comic on one side. I can minimize this one for now, and then I see just one page, and I can zoom in on this page if I want to. And each frame, as you can see, will be marked. If I have that frame, let's show the layers. Let's show the layer options. Let's see there. So here you can see the layers, that each frame here has its own kind of layered folder. So this is everything that is inside this one. If I shut off the eye, you can see this frame disappears. So everything in the frame is within one box. And how to make these, I'm not going to show, because that's another thing. There is a lot of good tutorials on how to use Clip Studio Paint. So I could recommend you to go see those tutorials and learn that step by step, how to make frames and paneling, and how to use different tools. This is not going to be a tutorial of how to use Clip Studio Paint. I'm going to focus on more the idea of how to ink and how to tone, so you can use it for digital or traditional thinking. So it's more of a mindset I'm going to talk about. All the technical stuff, I prefer you watch other videos for, because that's going to be too much to put into this video. So about the actual line arting, or I call it inking, because there's some steps of line art. We talked about how to draw poses, and if you can see for this frame, for example, let's zoom in on this frame. So this frame has several parts. It has, I'm gonna turn off some of these parts so you can see the start of the frame. So the start of the frame was the sketch. This was my very, very quick sketch. We talked about sketching before, or about doing poses and characters and facial and stuff like that. So that's previous episodes. I think it's episode 767 or something. It's about movement and poses. So that one, go check them out. Next step, I made a more like pretty sketch. So this is the ugly sketch and the pretty sketch. As you can see, I put them on top of each other, and you can see it's pretty much the same. The simple sketch is, the rough sketch is very rough. so it's too rough for me to just ink on top of without messing it up. If this was a character I have drawn a lot, like for example Amalthea, I had drawn Amalthea for one full book, and then at that point, after one book, I could actually, from the rough sketches, I could start inking right away because I'd learned how to draw her. This character, Hilda, she's still very new to me. I have just made 50 pages with her, so that's a little too. It's just I haven't gotten used to her yet. So it's about we talked about muscle memory before, about how much you've drawn something. If you draw the same thing a lot of times, you will at some point feel like it's in your arm. It's not in your head or your eyes, it's in your arm, and how do you draw the strokes. And that's why I prefer like doing a fine sketch of her before I do the inking, just to show like how I actually want the lines. And then I do the inking. And as you can see, the difference between the rough sketch, so this is the rough sketch. I'm going to zoom in on it, or the fine sketch. I'm going to zoom in even more on the sketch just to show you the difference in lines. So for this one, I use the pen tool, this pen tool here. So this one pen tool is the one that I'm using for the sketch. That's why you can see the lines they look a little bit like very rough-ish. They look like like a pen, like a no, pencil, more like a pencil. I mean, like it almost looks like graphite. The lines, and so I don't care much about how many lines I draw when I do the fine sketching, because when I do the fine sketching, this is not going to be pretty anyway. It's not going to be visible in the final step. The final step is the inking, and these lines need to be where I want them to be. And for this one, I use, you can see here's the fine sketch, and here's the ink on top of that. And for the inking, I use the tool called G Pen. And there's two different tools in Clip Studio Paint, one called G Pen and one called Real G Pen. And I prefer a Real G Pen. I'm going to talk about why. And this is also one thing for when you work with traditional tools, is that you want to think about how to do dynamic lines. So I'm going to show here with a new layer. And you see these kind of lines. I put a new layer on top just to not mess up my pretty lines here, my inking. So if I choose the G Pen, you see this line here is with the G Pen, and this one is with the Real G Pen. You see that there's a difference in texture. And this is one thing that the first one, the normal G Pen, has a very smooth texture. And I think that works well if you want your art to look more like digital and clean. It works well for example, if your inspiration is more like cartoony or maybe American comics. But for manga, in traditional manga, you use G Pen, traditional G Pens, like dip pens. So if you want your digital manga to kind of imitate the traditional way of doing manga, I recommend you to use the Real G Pen, because that will look like lines on, like you have drawn the lines with the dip pen on paper.
It almost looks like the ink has bled a little bit, which is really cool. That's such a very, very cool effect.
Yeah, and you can see that here on these lines, they're a little bit rugged and like roughy, and that actually helps making the picture look more authentic, look more traditional, and more like Japanese manga.
We have a little comment here from Seven, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Natalia's English is amazing. Is this some kind of Swedish sorcery? I can confirm, having hung out with Natalia for a week while she was here in LA, her English is phenomenal. It's half the time I forget I'm speaking with someone who is not a native English speaker. So yes, absolutely.
I call it, I'm a total Americanophile. I watch too much American stuff, so I think I watch more American, especially American politics. I know more about your politics than my own politics. This is an issue, I promise you. Like, I don't know what's happening in Sweden, in the Swedish part, but I know what's happening with Trump. I promise you.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your situation. So yeah, I'm gonna be the one saying I'm sorry. Yeah.
All I will say right now, we will take a very brief note to just say Please vote.
Yes.
Please vote, everyone.
For the whole world, I think that would be nice for us as well. Like even though this is a very enjoyable view from our perspective, we know that it's gonna mess up the whole world. So vote.
Yes, please vote.
If you're in America and you have the right to vote, do it.
Please vote. Excellent. Great. We had our little political. I knew it was going to happen. We had our little political detour. So let's go back to manga.
Yes. Let's talk about manga. So the inking is one step, and like I talked about, the thing is doing dynamic lines. So a dynamic line, like you see here on the eye here. So this is a very extreme zoom in on her eye, and you can see that every line has a tip and a middle that is more thick and an end that is more thin. So depending on how much pressure I put on this digital pen. So I have like a digital pen and a screen. This helps you. I don't think you can do this with a normal mouse, or definitely not with a mouse pad on a laptop. You need to have some kind of drawing tool to be able to make the pen pressure work. So that's one thing you need to get for this setup. But it's quite affordable. I think you can find like very basic ones of these. You don't have to have like a screen I have. You can have like a normal pad. And you can find them for like 50 to like $100 at most. And you can find a pretty good one for that price. So you don't have to invest like several thousands. You don't have to.
Yeah,
you could, but you don't have to.
I will hop in here and say that, again, this is not an advertising endorsement here, but we have at TOKYOPOP, we have worked with a company called XP Pen before that make their own tablets, and they have been phenomenal. They've been an absolute joy to talk with, and their tablets they're trying to make more affordable tablets. So I think their basic beginner tablet is, I think, about $250.
That's
for a very decent size. I'm gonna say 16-inch. It might be a little small. I know they had a large 20-inch as well. I have personally gotten a chance to play around with that a lot, and it was awesome. I mean, again, I'm not an artist. I haven't played with a high-end tablet, so goodness knows I could know, but I am a nerd, so I have used it to make maps for my D&D game.
Nice.
And it was a million times easier working with that than it was working with, a mouse and everything like that. So keep in mind that you can get these tools at this point fairly inexpensively, and for the most part, people are not going to know the difference. Maybe you want to upgrade later, but it's fine to start with for sure.
I upgraded like several steps. So in the beginning, just learning the techniques. It's better to keep something that is that can kind of be your learning step, so you don't have to have the best tools from the beginning. I see a lot of like new beginners or amateurs. They like invest a lot in technique, in tools, and then they don't know how, or like hardware and stuff or softwares, and then they don't know how to use it, and that's kind of going to waste, especially because if you don't use it, it's gonna be a couple of years later it's gonna be outdated and you need to buy a new one anyway. So better buy a cheap one, learn with that one, and upgrade when you have money, or when you feel like, okay, now this one is kind of, I'm growing out of this and need a better one.
Absolutely.
So about the line,
I'm just going to interrupt very quickly. We have a couple of comments. Okay, so a couple of people have unfortunately discovered my ulterior identity as a robot, Beat Boop. Sorry, guys. At this point, I'm hesitant to play around with the OBS settings anymore, so you will have to put up with my robot alter persona in my voice. But we actually have a very interesting question here that I can answer from Ellen Lundis. Why is manga in black and white and not colored? So I actually know this from a publishing perspective. It's a very simple question. Black and white is cheaper to print. The paper is cheaper. It's lighter. And black and white, when you print, you typically tell the printer how many colors you're going to be including. And every color costs a little bit more. So if you're printing in black and white, boom, that's really, really, really easy. And if you ever pick up an American graphic novel that's 160 pages, and then pick up like a manga that's 160 pages, you are going to feel the difference in the weight. There's actually a joke, if anyone's ever seen it, the skull-faced bookseller Honda-san, which is an anime or a manga that I highly recommend if you're at all interested in the publishing industry. But there is a joke in the bookstore where one of his co-workers, he works in the American graphic novel section of his bookstore, and somebody goes to pick up his box of books and almost breaks their back in half because they were expecting it to be so heavy. So it's a very simple answer. It is just a cost measure more than anything. And you're also correct. Seven brought up that coloring is a full-time job. You are correct. That would also include, maybe one colorist, maybe two colorists. I know that our Zero's Journey comic, as it's continued, has had sometimes 3 colorists working on the flats and the shadows and the shading. So a lot of reasons behind it.
That's the reason why manga in Japan is being like published 30 pages each month, or even sometimes 20 pages each week. I mean, if they were in color, first of all, you have to have one assistant just working full-time with color, at least one, and you could probably not publish as many pages because it's too expensive, but also you couldn't make so many pages because coloring is, I would say, if I had to color this one, it would take me at least twice the time to do it.
And I can actually I have an example right here for you guys. These are 2 manga. I just pulled them off my shelf. 2 of our Disney manga. We have Monsters, Inc., which is a very traditional black and white manga. And you can see these are pretty much about the same size, but Miri and Marie, full color.
Wow.
Mostly pink, but it is full color. And this one we fully had to charge extra for. We had to charge a whole $2 more for the book because just producing it with the color makes it that much more expensive. I mean, it is unbelievably adorable. But it does make printing a book so much more expensive.
Yeah, and that's why it's so rare to do manga in color. I love color manga because there's like a lot of things you miss when you just have them black and white. But on the other hand, for me as an artist, I can make 1 to 2 pages black and white per day if I have like a deadline. If I would have to do them in color, 1 page would take 2 days. So it would be twice or even 3 times as much time. So let's continue. So I show you here inking with kind of inking the lines. When you ink the lines, remember to pressure so you get this kind of pointed nibs. And I talk about think about it as like an airplane. You draw the line and then you land and you take off. So the whole pen, the pen should be in movement. Don't stop, put down, draw up. Don't do that. That's not how an airplane goes. You should do it all in a movement, land and take off. And that's how you want to make the lines. That's the easiest way for me to explain it. It's remember to always be drawing the line in the movement, even in the air. So you're drawing in there in the movement and then draw the line. So you can't see my hand right now, but I'm doing this in the movement. So it's all smooth and landing on the paper, pressing down, and then taking off again. So that's what you have to remember when you draw the lines. Don't make them like this. This is not how you do it.
Vary your line
make them
weight.
Make sure you have a nib, it should be pointy in each end like this. You can draw like this. This is more speed lines or action lines, but a line like this, there's no reason to have pen pressure if you just draw them even. You want to be able to vary the pressure, and that's how you make more manga-esque lines. And I think my best recommendation is just study how manga is made, different artists, look at manga pages and try to copy how they draw the lines, and try to copy drawing the line in one movement, not drawing one line and then filling it in like this. Don't do that. This is not how you do it. You should be able to draw that line in one movement like this. So like one movement, like that. So that's how you want it. You want to draw the line and to make it pointy. Now, I think my pen needs a little bit of stabilizing. There's settings you can change. Also, check out other videos for that. I can't go through all the settings in this one, but remember, when you draw manga, you want to make the lines dynamic. Also, the next one thing about drawing manga with like inking. So I'm gonna show you the page again. I'm gonna zoom out on the page and show you the whole page. One thing that you can see on this page, and we can actually go over to Runebound again. So let's show you all of Runebound. This is all of Runebound. And you can see here that the pages that stick out, that you kind of get caught, that your eyes get caught by, are the ones that have a lot of black on them. Mm-hmm. So this is a very, very important thing. Don't forget the black. And this is very important, especially in mangas that are very action-based, like shonen manga, seinen manga. You can see that the more like action or horror or thrilling the manga is, the more black they add. So if you, for example, have more of a cutesy, maybe more drama or romance, maybe the pages are more like light, very light. So for example, in this manga, you can see that every page that is more dark is more action loaded and dramatic or effective, while the pages that are more lightweight, like we have, for example, here we have these two pages that are a little bit more, like all these three are a little bit lighter, and they have actually more of a dialogue scene. So this scene is more of a dialogue scene, while this scene up here is more of an action scene. So you can see how when I use more black, that's usually a good way to kind of get the reader to get caught by it and stay in there because it's darker. So plan where you put the blacks. We've talked about that before, and that's important as well. And also to try to vary the thickness of the lines depending on how far things are in the picture. If they are very like far away or very close up, you should change the lines. Of course, things that are close up should be thicker. I'm gonna see if I can find some examples of this. If I have some good example of a depth, maybe this one, for example. This is a scene where we have the main characters are meeting the rival here. So in this frame with the rival, we can see that she is standing here in the front, and in the back we have another character. And as you can see, the lines around this character is named Tyrid, and this is her slave, her trail that she uses for fighting with. And Tyrid, the lines of her face and every like part, all the line art here is much thicker compared to the trail, which is more in the background. I also put a tone on top of him to make him even more in the background. So this is also very much of a thing you can use by putting thicker lines on the things in the front and thinner lines on the things in the back. You can kind of move things and kind of place things in a depth. I think I did it here as well. We can see this frame here. We see this is Aske, one of the main characters, and this is Hilda, the other main character, and Aske's body is a little bit in the front. We only see his tummy and he's kind of rising up, and his lines are much thicker than Hilda's lines, which are thinner. Also, as you can see, I personally draw the speech bubbles with thinner lines, but that also depends on like from manga to manga. So I recommend you to check your favorite mangas and copy how they do frame borders, speech bubbles, screaming bubbles, speed lines. Always check these techniques from actual mangas. Reference a lot when it comes to these kind of techniques, how to do things. So yeah, that's kind of thickness depending on if things are in the front or in the back. That's another thing you should do, definitely should do. That's one trick that we use in manga, because manga doesn't have a 3D effect. We don't have the depth as in when you do coloring, you can always make the back colors more muted and the front colors more saturated, and that way you can find a depth in the picture. But when it comes to manga, everything is pretty flat, so you have to find other techniques, and that's why the thickness of the lines is one technique to make depth. Another technique is blackness, like I said before. If you go back to all the manga pages, one thing is to use black in front or in the back. So I'm gonna see if I can find some example of this. So what I'm looking for is, for example, a picture where I have, this one is a good example. So this is a scene. The whole manga is about kind of a Viking world, because I'm from Sweden, so I really like Viking or the Norse mythology. So this story is about Vikings, and in the Viking kind of god mythology, they had special destiny gods called the Norns, and they take care of the people's destinies. They kind of make their destiny through threads. So all these threads are human lives, and these Norns, they kind of weave the lives of the humans. And in here, so this is Yggdrasil. This is one of the roots of the life tree, Yggdrasil. And to make depth of this picture, as you can see, there's a lot of things happening in the background. And to show that this is the background, I made the full picture, as you can see here. I made sure that the things in the front is kind of dark, very, very dark. So I kind of framed the whole picture with darkness on the sides. So this front is a root, and we even have a squirrel. The squirrel is actually also a character from Norse mythology. So a bonus point if you know the name for the squirrel. But this is a god as well, the squirrel. And this, so you can see how the tail of the squirrel and the root here, it's actually, let's see if we can just zoom in a little bit. These are darker, and then we have some light here in the middle, and then we also have a darkness in the very back here. And that way, by putting darkness in the very back and darkness in the front, I kind of lit up the middle part, and that way I created a depth in the picture. And also, as you can see, I lit up the tree. So the tree roots, the stumps, the whole part of the root system is very light. They have shadows underneath it, but it's light on top of it. And that way I also kind of emphasized the root system. So that's another way how you can use black and darkness to create depth, and also quite a lot of like effect. Like this feels like a place that you can feel the depth of this place, the 3D effect kind of. So that's another thing. And by using details and hatching or cross hatching, so this is another good example of it. This picture has a lot of it. Details, of course, like you can see, there's a lot of details here. So all these threads are great for creating depth or creating a very impactful picture. We talked about how to make, in a previous lesson, we talked about how to make each page and each spread, manga spread, 2 pages. This is a spread, 2 pages together, how to make them more interesting, and how to at least have one picture that is kind of standing out. So this is that picture. And to have a lot of details in that picture is a good way to make it stand out. And one way is to use hatching. So I'm going to show you some examples, like you can see here. All these lines, these are hatching. For example, by using this here, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to remove the layer where we have the screen tones, because they're a little bit in the way right now. I'm going to remove the screen tones. And you can see this is hatching. This is when you have many lines together, and I'm kind of drawing them together in groups. And that way I create some kind of shadow, a texture, shadow, kind of creases in like fabric. You can use them in fabric, on clothing. You can use them on, this is a tree stump, for a tree root system, and that way you create kind of texture and shapes. So this is a very important tool for a learn, is hatching. There's a lot of I recommend you to Google or YouTube how to hatch inking, ink hatching, or hatch inking. So it's this is a very good tool. Just practice drawing lines together, and you can see they don't have to be parallel. Sometimes they have to be parallel. This one here, this is just a mess of lines, but it creates that texture. So depending on if it's it should be like, for example, when it comes to wood or a tree, the texture should be more rough. If it was more of a clean texture, I would have more of a clean hatching technique. So that depends on what kind of texture you're after. Yeah, so that's another way. So we go back, zoom out on this one. And now I'm done with inking. Let's talk a little bit about tones, and then we're gonna talk about how to pitch it for a publisher. Quickly about tones. Let's go through this quickly. My best recommendation for doing tones is actually to use. For example, for this one, I can show you how it looks in the files here. What I do is actually I just create a folder. I've created a folder up here with this one here, new layer folder. And in this one, I put new layers. Each is a new layer. And these layers, I make them into different, as you can see, I changed the opacity of each layer. So this one has 30% opacity. This one has 50% opacity. So this is the layer is actually black. Like if I, for example, change this one, 50% opacity, these are the Norns hooded clothing, this kind of cloaks they have on. They are 50%. But if I make them 100%, you can see this is just black. I just color black on these layers, and then I change the opacity to the level I want it. And this is more of how I think screen tones work in Japan, because when you work with Japanese screen tones, each screen tone, like this kind of sticky paper I showed you in lesson 1, go back and check it if you want to. Those kind of sticky papers, they always have like, they show what percentage like of how much color is in it, like 60%, 30%, 50%. So knowing the percentage of how dark it is between white and black. So white is 0 and black is 100. So everything in between there, that's the percentage of the screen tone. And that's why I use this technique where you actually can decide. And that way I can also go back and change. So if, for example, I did the Norns in 50%, and then I realized, oh, this is too dark, I need to make them lighter, I can always go back and just change them. Maybe they are better in like 20%, so I can change them to 20%, and now you see they have another color. The only thing I changed was the opacity, and this way it's much easier to change screen tones later on. This is my recommendation for doing screen toning, and this is how I screen toned Amalthea as well, my manga Amalthea. And then to make it actually into screen tones, as you can see, this one, I put a layer, setting on top of it as a tone. So this is actually just a layer setting. I'm going to see if I can find the window for layer property. Here we have the layer property, and you can see the tone is marked in the layer property. If I unmark the tone and I zoom in on my picture, you can see this is just a color. This is just black, but in 50%. But if I mark this tone again, suddenly it becomes a screen tone. And this is so easy. It's just a button. And of course, it has some settings. Yeah, it has settings. You can just change the settings. But the good thing with this is really, really the best thing with this, is that if I would like to make this a digital manga, an online manga, I don't want the screen tones, because the tones, when I make them online, it's going to look really bad. I'm going to show you here. Like when I zoom out, it's going to look like this kind of moire effect. We talked about it previously, and this is how it looks when you have tones on a screen. It doesn't look good. If I just unclick this button, it's a smooth gray surface. It's pretty for digital online manga. So if you want to work with your manga and both be able to make it a digital comic anytime, or you would like to make it a printed comic and have the same pretty gray even tone, then this is the best way. Of course, also one thing, when you want to print manga, always follow the rule. It should be 1200 dpi, 1200 dpi. This is the resolution, and this is something you decide when you create a file. So I think we've talked about this before, but if you have a trouble with this, you can always ask me again on an email. But 1200 dpi resolution, that's very important. And always make the manga in the size that you want to print it. So if you have an idea of making it into a book, make it in the size you want to make the book. So yeah, probably follow the rules of like a normal manga book is usually a C format or a B format. And the good thing with Clip Studio Paint is that they have these kind of prepared file formats already. So you can just choose between the normal files, the more common file sizes, or the page sizes there. Yeah, so this is just click and just get screen tones. Now I want to go through one more thing is, when do you use tones and not? This is very important. Quickly, don't use tones as coloring. It is not coloring. Tones is tones, coloring is coloring. When you color a picture, you need to color every surface that shouldn't be white, right? Everything that shouldn't be white should be in a color. Like if you colored this picture where I'm in, like the background should be this color, more like a brown orange. Like my face needs to be one color, my shirt, like everything needs to be one color. Like this one needs to be more yellowish. But if you would do this picture that I'm in a manga, maybe you'd only put black as a t-shirt and gray as a background. That's it. Like you shouldn't put too much tones. The trick with doing tones, and I'm going to go back to the Runebound comic here, is to keep the white as much as possible and to only use tones for, I have 4 reasons where you can use the tones. So this is really important. Write this down. First reason, emotional emphasis. So you can use tones for emotional emphasis, and I'm going to show you when. That is an example. This is a good example of a manga page where I use tone for emotional emphasis. Let's see if it can open it up. It's a little bit slow today. Yeah, here it is. So this frame here, I have used a tone for emotional emphasis. And what I mean with that is that this manga page is where the main character is kind of like really beaten down and he's really sad. So what I did in this frame is that I'm going to undo the tone so you can see it better, is that I put one tone on top of him. Let's see if we can zoom out and see it better. It's a really like a noisy tone. It's actually called noise, this tone. It's like it looks like a noise on a screen or something, like this one. And that is a very messy tone. You feel like rough, or like it's an emotional tone. You can use it for emotional screen toning. And by putting it with like the darkest on the bottom and then toning it out to the top, I made it feel like there's a heavy feeling. The character is very gloomy, dark, feeling very blue, depressing, and that's perfect for this scene. So this is an emotional way of using tones. You can also use it, I'm going to show another one. It's going to be, for example, in here, I have it also sometimes in this scene here, we have a very emotional scene where the main character is kind of, showing that he's ready to step in and kind of partake in the fight. So what I did here is I've used the tone down here, for example, for her. I did the same thing. She also has like a darker bottom and lighter top, but the way that I used it is more like a emphasis on her face, so she kind of pops out. And I used it up here more as a shadow, but the shadow is not a real shadow, because really if this was a scene, the light source would actually be in front of him. So this would be this shadow doesn't exist. But the way that I use the shadow is also more for an emotional emphasis. It's kind of a way of kind of making him a little bit more shadowed, a little bit more dramatic. So there's different ways, and the best way to learn how to use the emotional emphasis tones is reading manga. Just read a lot of manga, and you will notice that in each chapter there's several times a manga artist uses tones for emphasis. So that's one of the third is emotional emphasis. One is for depth. And we talked about this before, just like you can use black for depth, you can use tones as well. So one example is, let's go back to the Runebound and see if we have another example. And so the depth is good to kind of, this one is one example where we want to create the feeling of something is in the background and something in the front. So the bottom picture here, we have Aske, one of the characters, are in the back. Let's close this one down. So we have Aske in the back, and we have Hilda, one of the main characters, in the front. And by putting one tone on him, a shadow tone on him, which makes him put him a little bit in the back, and then the one on the front that she has more tones, first of all, so that makes it feel like she's closer to the camera. She has more detailed tones on herself, several layers of tones even. And she also has one tone that goes from dark on the bottom to lighter on the top, which is also a shadow tone. This way it also creates a depth. So it feels like the light source is in the background. I didn't put any tones, as you can see. So in the background, you find this kind of hot burning. That's the light source for this picture. And they are walking away from the light source. And this way I create a depth in the picture by thinking of them as different layers. So we have the background layer, we have the middle is Aske, this character, and then the front is Hilda, this character. And you can see, using tones in different ways. No tones in the back, middle one has just one tone, front has several tones. That way I can also create depth in the picture. So that's one more of these fours. Third one, for shadows. Like I said before, you can use them for shadows. This one is one example, because we know that the light source is in the back and this is the front. But you can also use it for like just creating depth in a face, for example. So we have the first picture we had. Let's see, this one. You see how I used it in her face, and in his face, for example, I used the shadowing, and in her face as well, I used some for shadowing, just to create also kind of a little bit of a shadow, like a little bit of a coloring effect. It feels like it's colored, but it's not colored. And the third one, the fourth one, is actually using it for colors, but this should be very, you should be very careful with this. So what I have done, I'm going to show you the cover, and this is a good way to think about coloring, using tones for coloring, is to minimize the number of different tones or percentages of tones you use on each character. So Hilda is one of the main characters, Aske is one other main character, and as you can see, Aske, he has 2 tones on him, and that's actually a lot for shonen manga. Usually in shonen manga, they only have 1 at most. But he has 2. He has 1 on his upper shirt and 1 on his pants, which is a little bit darker. I think it's 30% on his shirt and 60% on his pants. And Hilda also have 30 and 60%, but she has 30% on her dress and 60% on her cloak. And these are the only... Like, I have added some shadows on her as well, but you don't have to add that. It's just for the detail effect for the cover. Usually she doesn't have these shadows in her hair. Usually she only has, and the shadows are 20%. Usually she only has the dress and the cloak. And that way, because I only have that, first of all, it minimizes work for me. Every time I show them, I don't have to add several screen tones. Second of all, they're just easy to make them pop out, and the reader can easily identify each character. So don't give them too many tones, because that's going to be just a mess of color or gray, and it's going to become a gray mess. So these 4 ways are how you should use tones, and my recommendation is, if you follow these 4 tones and try to keep as much white as possible, you will make your manga look less amateurish, because that's usually one of the reasons why some manga look like amateur manga, is because they use too much tones. They think tones are color, and they are not. Remember that. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. There's ways to text in this program as well. I'm not going to go through that. There's tutorials about that. And of course, add sound effects. We had a whole episode or a whole lesson about that.
Yes.
Talk about that. Yeah, and speed lines you can add in this program as well. But I would recommend you to go through tutorials about how to use Clip Studio Paint for those kind of technical stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you have your manga.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Imagine that. You just, in 10 classes, Natalia has led you from knowing nothing through to having a complete manga. But here's the next part of that. You've got your manga, you've made your comic, you've made your manga. What do you do with it? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're going to want to show your friends, you're going to want to show your family, but if you want to get a wider audience, now you've got to think about where are you going to put it. There are a lot of options out there, and I highly recommend thinking about this even before you start. Think about where do you want to put this? Because a lot of online sites, you've got Webtoon, you've got Tapas, you've got Tokyopop's own Pop
Yeah.
Comics. There's a number of these different sites that you can upload that they all work a little bit differently. Webtoon is what we call vertical scroll. You scroll to read a comic, and it tends to be short single panels that are meant to be read vertically. And it can be kind of hard to take something like Runebound and put that on Webtoons. You'd have to do a lot of chopping and cutting and re-editing, and it would get quite difficult. So I would recommend think about what platform you want to put this on. What's the audience for it? Who do you want to be reading this? And start designing it with that in mind. But for the sake of ease, because we've been talking about Clip Studio Paint, we've been talking about making traditional manga, we're going to assume that you are looking at getting this published, that you want to get this printed, that you want to have this book in your hands and say, this is my book. So you're always going to want to think about which publishers you want to promote your book to, that you want to present your book to. Different publishers have different emphasis on different titles. Viz in the US is very well known for shonen manga, lots of action, fast-paced stuff, One Piece, Naruto, My Hero Academia, stuff like that. You may want to go to somewhere like Yen Press or Seven Seas that does more romance stuff, that does more sort of a little bit sexier content. Tokyopop, we tend to really like non-Japanese creators. We kind of like to bring you into our fold. And we're also really big on discussions of diversity and representation in manga as well. So we're always got an eye for slightly unusual titles and titles that that promote diversity. So think about what your story is, who the audience is, who you want to pitch it to, and then of course you've got to think about your pitch. We get pitches all the time. It's very common to get pitches, and there are good pitches and there are bad pitches. An example of a bad pitch would be sending an email to someone that you haven't researched who this email is going to. So you're just sending out an email into the void. You don't spell check it. You don't grammar check it. You type it out like it's a text message to your best friend on your phone, and you say, "Hi, will you publish my manga?" That is, I get a half dozen of those every week, and they're terrible because you've shown me that you've put no effort into your pitch. You've told me nothing about yourself. You haven't researched our company, and you also haven't told me anything about your manga. These are all very, very, very bad. An example of an amazing pitch was somebody who came up to me at a convention. I think this was at C2E2 in Chicago a couple of years ago. Walked up to the booth and said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. Can I speak with you about a manga proposal?" And I said, of course. And we sat aside, and they had a folder. They had a binder with them. And they had printed out pages. They had sheets with character designs on them. They had early rough sketches. They had a script in there. They had business cards. They sat down. They talked about their vision. They told me how old the art was, how much they progressed, how long they planned the story to be. It was absolutely fantastic. It was such a great presentation. And unfortunately, it wasn't the kind of manga that we were printing at the time, but I made sure to tell them, this is awesome, do more of this. And then, of course, they followed it up with a digital version through email, so I still got all of the files afterwards to work with. That's an example of a really good pitch. You just want to make sure that you've got something to show a publisher. So, for example, Natalia's done Runebound here. I know a few people have asked in the chat whether this is going to be printed, whether it's going to be, officially published. This is, of course, a very short story at 50 pages. Now, that's not to say it couldn't be. There's quite a few popular manga that start out as short stories that then get redone and readapted and turned into longer stories. This would be an excellent pitch. Natalia could bundle this up as a PDF, write to a bunch of publishers and say, hi, I'm Natalia Batista. I have this manga. I think it's really great. I made this short version of it. I'd love to adapt it into a longer story. Please tell me what you think, and send this to publishers. And now publishers have an idea of what kind of storyteller Natalia is. You know, her artwork.
Also one thing I want to add about that is actually right, Kate, what you want, because many times I know a lot of manga artists who think that I have to have finished the whole manga. It has to be like a 200-page comic at least, and then I can send it in, or maybe 3 volumes finished, which is sometimes 5-6 years of work.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I'm ready to show it to a manga artist or manga publisher. That might be too late, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it definitely depends on what again, this is why it's so important to research your publisher. Yeah. What is your publisher looking for? Because sometimes bringing a fully completed project and saying, like you did with Sir Francis Amalthea, is coming up and saying,
this one was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, because that makes it so much easier.
That was a lucky shot.
That was a very lucky shot.
Yeah.
That was a lucky shot. Because Sir Francis Amalthea needed, like, virtually no real input from us other than a translation. I think you chose to update some of the artwork here and there, and we asked you to make some new covers. And that was it. It was a very simple, easy process with that. And that was an easy one for us because we were like, this is just good. Great, brilliant.
But don't take this as an example. Like most of the times, like I have tried to sell this to different countries, and sometimes I get a no because it's a finished story, it's 3 books, and sometimes people say this is, or some editors or publishers say this is not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And if this was a work I've been working for 6 years alone in my bedroom with, and then that's the answer I get, that would be terrible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to have something to show. I would say an absolute minimum of 1 chapter. Personally, I'm looking for 3 or more chapters. That basically, because 1 chapter, you're pretty much doing your introductions, right? I've seen a lot of manga that change very quickly in terms of pacing and storytelling between chapters 1 and 3. So that gives us an idea of your type of storytelling, the quality of your art, the layouts of your panels, how experienced you are. A big question that people are going to ask you is sort of how quickly you work. And I really want to emphasize this, there's not necessarily a wrong answer to that, but you have to be honest. If you work slow, tell them you work slow. Don't work slow and then tell them you work fast because you think that's what they want to hear, because then you'll end up with like delays in publishing. Marketing team will have a hard time promoting your book for you. It turns into a big mess, so just make sure you're honest. I see a question here. How would we contact publishers in Japan? Okay, so I'm going to be really blunt with this one. Learn Japanese. Publishers in Japan are not going to talk to you in English. They're fully not. And I can speak Japanese, but I can't speak Japanese well enough to talk to a publisher in Japan. I would embarrass myself. It's going to be very, 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 very hard to get taken seriously as a non-Japanese creator in Japan. And whether that's the right thing or not, I think people could argue all day. I know Natalia disagrees with that as well. It's a big problem, but it is the way things are there right now. I would recommend making a name for yourself first. There is no shame in publishing in your home country, wherever that is, and publishing that and embracing the fans that you have around you. It's really, really important.
Yeah. We talked about this in the previous lesson about maybe seeing Japan as the final boss in a game, and what you can learn from your local market, which is, first of all, in your native language. Second of all, people you can actually meet because you're there. Unless you move to Japan and learn Japanese, which in itself is several years of work, you're not going to be in the same spot or in the right spot or with the right knowledge to be able to talk to them. Like if you aim for a company or a publisher in your own hometown or in your home home country, you can actually go to conventions, you can meet them, you can do like you said about this person with a portfolio. You can go there and they can actually see your face, and that means so much. That means so much. Like, for example, when I got picked up by Tokyopop, one pretty quick thing that we did was that I got to meet Stu Levy, the chief of the owner of Tokyopop, and he actually traveled to Stockholm, to Sweden, and we met up and we talked, and that just a personal connection that is key. And you can't do that from Europe or from America to Japan unless you're there. So I think it's much easier to go to Japan and kind of export yourself to Japan if you have a track record, if they can see that, oh, this person is actually published in several countries or in its own country and have done a manga already, knows the deadlines, everything. That's key. That's really important.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can also have your manga, like Natalia said, exported to Japan. That does happen. Sometimes we will find a Japanese company that's interested and will say, we'd like to license this. Can you help us translate it for you? And then we can release it in Japan. So there's always an avenue there. But yeah, definitely stick with what you've got here. It's a great place to start. I really want to emphasize as well, don't be afraid to approach publishers at conventions. We're very nice people. We don't bite. And it is interesting because as much as we are all in competition with one another, obviously we're all publishing books and we all want to be the best at publishing books. We're all friends, actually. We all hang out. We all get drinks at the end of the day at conventions. We all chat about what we're making. We chat about what's doing well for us, that kind of thing. We all talk to one another. So we're all nice, friendly, approachable people. Do not be afraid to just walk up, have a business card or some way that you can be contacted, have some examples of your work, and just walk up and say, hi, I'm putting myself out there. I know that's going to sound really scary, but no one's going to yell at you. No one's going to bite your hand off. At worst, you might get, hey, now's not a great time. Can you come back in 2 hours? Or something like that. But it shows us that you are willing to put yourself out there. It shows us that you have faith in your work, that you have passion. And it also shows us, honestly, as the marketing person, it shows us that you're willing to put yourself out there in terms of promoting your stuff, which is huge.
Very important today. Very important. Like it's a good thing if you have already an online community or fan base or online kind of network that you're kind of bouncing your ideas off and getting feedback from, or getting support by. Like if you have followers on social media or friends that you can show things to. But if you can show your work to an editor, that's a really important part of your development. And remember, like Kae said, the editors are humans as well. Like they are also manga fans. They also like reading a good manga story, and they will also like all the feedback you will get from an editor is honest feedback that they give you because they want you to succeed.
Yes.
Like no good editor wants you to make a bad manga. No one. So the editor's feedback is even better.
Yeah, we don't want a bad manga. We're paying a lot of money to print your book.
Yeah.
We want it to be the absolute best that it can possibly be. That's that's a very good thing. Is think of your publisher, your editor, your publishing team. Think of them as your best tools to make the best manga that you can. And like I said, when earlier when Natalia brought Runebound to me and said, hey, can you review this as a friend and let me know what's up? And I came back and said, listen, I don't feel like the motivation here is meshing for me, and I can't quite figure out why. Instead of Natalia saying, well, obviously his motivation is this. Didn't you read it?
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah, she said, okay, well, let's try and figure out why. So this and this, and we talked back and forth, and we figured it out, and Natalia put her ego aside and went, oh, okay, somebody doesn't quite understand this. Let's figure out the way to fix it. And it was so easy and so quick. And that means a lot as well to me because I knew that I could read Natalia's manga and that when she said I would like feedback, she meant it. And then she would listen to that feedback and she would take that feedback and really do good things with it.
And one thing I want to also, if you, and I think a lot of you who watch this stream or these kind of lessons have the goal of being published in Japan at some point, if you want to work with a Japanese editor, I mean, first of all, the European and the West or the American editors, they are so much kinder, or so much like the editors here are like, if you compare to a Japanese editor, what I've heard and seen is like those editors can really tear apart your work if they don't like it. Like you have to, if you feel like you don't have a tough skin and like your skin is not thick enough for all that feedback, start with editors from here, because they know you, like they know your culture a little bit better. And
Yes.
to deal with a Japanese editor would be another thing. Also, one more thing, I hear a lot of aspiring manga artists from the West, from Europe or from America, tell me, I have this really great idea and it's gonna be perfect for Shonen Jump. It's gonna be published in Japan. It's gonna be such a good idea. And then you say, okay, but how about if you first start with something small? No, I want to make this idea. It's gonna be so good. That idea, and if especially I hear people say, I am not willing to let an editor change my idea because it's so good. I really love my idea and my characters. You are going to be the worst manga artist in the world. Like
Yes.
literally, no really good manga artist that has been big and like made it big internationally have ever said that. Like there is, I can like, sure, there are some original manga artists that are like special in their own way, but those are few and far between. Most manga artists, if you have read Bakuman or watched the anime, know that most manga artists, they listen carefully and they are ready to kill their darlings.
Yes.
You have to be willing to kill your darlings if your editor tells you this is not good enough.
Yes.
So that's the most important lesson from this whole manga course.
Yes.
Learn to kill your darlings.
And I think it's very important to, there's a couple of points that you just reminded me of there, Natalia. One, whenever anyone comes to me and says, I have got the best idea ever for a manga, this thing is going to fly off the shelf, Shonen Jump's going to be just like screaming to get a hold of it, it's going to be amazing, they inevitably follow up with, it's about a 14-year-old boy who feels like an outcast, but then he finds out that he's actually got special powers, and he has to go out and learn how to use these special powers in order to fight the big bad guy. And at some point, a villain is going to come along, but the villain's actually going to have a change of heart and is going to become a bad guy, a bad boy, but good friend to the protagonist, and they're going to be frenemies. And it's like they just describe every Shonen Jump manga that exists, and maybe it is going to be a phenomenal idea. I mean, let's face it, Dragon Ball Z exists alongside Naruto and One Piece and My Hero Academia, which are all basically following that formula, but trying to pitch that idea in a sea of familiar ideas is going to be really, really, really hard. Really hard. And another, along that line, I want to say another really bad pitch you can do is write to a publisher and say, I have a really cool idea for a manga, and then lay out a paragraph of your idea and then say, okay, hire me. Spoiler, we're not going to. We have ideas everywhere. We have so many ideas. We're all idea people. Like, pretty much everyone who works in publishing is creative. What we need is somebody who has the idea and the artwork. Or if you have the idea and you're working with someone who does the artwork. We can come up with the ideas. That's no problem. What we need to do is find the artists. And, usually most publishers, at least I try to respond to everyone who writes to us with a pitch. A lot of publishers are not going to respond to you with that. It's not worth their time. So just make sure that you respect that there is somebody on the other end who has a job, who is doing their best, and they may not be able to respond to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad, but think about your pitch. Think about how you're laying it out. Think about trying to make it as easy as possible for that person to say yes. And we do actually have a question here from Weeaboo Trash, excellent username. What type of schedule do mangakas have? That's a really great question. The honest answer to that is that's going to be between you and your editor. You ideally will work with your editor, assuming you've signed a contract and you're working with a publisher. Your editor is going to lay out a schedule for you, working out, well, if we want the book to come out in December 2021, then we need to have finished print files by this date, and then we need to have like initial drafts by this date, and we need to have script by this date, and we'll work backwards from there and figure out how many pages that we need from you every week or every month, how many revisions we need to make. This is why it's so, so, so important to be honest with your editor about how quickly you work. Natalia is an absolute beast who works at a terrifying rate and always has her stuff on
but
time.
It took me years. It took me years to get to this point. So I recommend you, if you're very new to making manga and you're still finding your voice and your style and your kind of narration, your way of narration, make a lot of short stories and participate in competitions at most. Yeah. Don't send to a publisher before you know. My tip, and I think I've said this in previous episodes, and I'm going to say it again. Before you make a long story manga, I recommend you to make as many short stories, like as many pages of short stories as one manga book. So, for example, before I did my first manga book and pitched it to a company here in Sweden, a publisher here in Sweden, and that first manga published book that I wanted to make was 250 pages. Before those 250 pages, I had already made 300 pages of short stories. So I knew I could make 200 pages because I already made them. Yeah. And when I then made Amalthea, that was after that 200 pages manga. So when I started making Amalthea, and I knew I wanted Amalthea to be around 500 pages, I had already made 550 pages. So it's much easier for me to say, yes, I know I can make 550 pages, and it might take this and this much time because I knew. Don't aim for like 600 pages or 1,000 pages manga if you've barely made one page. Remember, start with short stories. Participate in competitions like the ones that we're making for this one. Do you want to talk about the competition? Like, segue over to the competition.
I absolutely will. I know we've got a couple more questions in here. I am going to answer them, guys. Don't worry. We are going to be having a competition. We're going to be having a contest. The details are going to go out this time next week. So keep an eye on this TOKYOPOP social media. We're going to announce all of the details then. We are going to be giving you guys a page restriction on this. I want you to write a really good comic or create a really good comic or really good manga, but you got to do it in a certain number of pages. This is going to be a really good exercise in making sure you tell your story without getting too long-winded, knowing how to kill your darlings, knowing how to edit yourself down. The whole point of this contest, we're going to pick a couple winners at the end. Someone's going to get some TOKYOPOP books, and winner is going to get a one-on-one call with Natalia, who is going to give you expert professional advice on your finished product, where you can improve things you've done really well, things to keep working on, things to stick with, some general tips and advice catered just to you. This is a really, really, really great opportunity, so definitely stick around next week to keep an eye out for that. Okay, so real quick, a couple more questions that we have. Follow-up from Weeaboo Trash. It's just I keep seeing people say that mangakas have crammed schedules. So in Japan, if you are producing manga for something like Shonen Jump or a weekly magazine that they release in Japan, yes. You are working on a schedule where you have to make a new chapter that is print ready by the next week. That is an insane schedule. That is absolutely insane. We generally don't do that in the U.S. In the U.S., we tend to publish the final completed book rather than chapter by chapter. And we generally don't do it. Even if we do chapter by chapter, it's generally not on such an absolutely crazy intense schedule. So ironically, this is what is going to be a lot easier if you aim for publishers in your home country rather than publishers in Japan. You're probably going to have a little bit of an easier schedule as well.
Yeah, So and learning curve. That's a learning curve. Yeah.
Agreed, absolutely. Do people actually read non-Japanese manga that are not in Jump? Yes. Because we are selling books. People do. People read all kinds of manga. I'm a shonen fan. I read Dragon Ball back in the day. I've read lots of Shonen Jump manga. But I also read really obscure manga. I have one on my shelf right now called Shinya Shokudo, which is about a midnight diner in Tokyo and about the people who go in there and eat food. And like no one's
To
ever
be
heard of it
honest,
in the
yeah.
US.
To be honest, I think that to some people that say I only read shonen manga for Shonen Jump, it's like saying I only eat pizza. I love pizza only. I'm not gonna eat any. Like I'm never gonna get a hamburger. I'm not gonna eat like a fillet. I'm never gonna touch a corn, a grilled corn or anything. I'm only eating pizza. Like why?
Why would you limit
Why would you
yourself?
do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, people are thrilled, and I will say this was at an event that Natalia was a guest at. This was at MCM in London a couple of years ago, and we had 4 of our International Women of Manga creators. We had Natalia, we had Sophie-chan, we had Ban and Gin Zarbo, and we actually had a fan came up to the table and bought one of everything. He bought every book on the table. And I had a great conversation with him while everyone was signing, their various copies of the books. And he said that if we had presented this manga to him 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, he'd have turned his nose up and he wouldn't even have looked at it because it wasn't Japanese. And now, because of the way the market is, we're seeing a lot more anime and manga style things that are coming out. He was like, I'm open-minded. I just know this stuff's good now, and why would I shoot myself in the foot and refuse to read it out of some weird elitism? If it's a good book, it's a good book.
Yeah.
And that made my heart happy because that's exactly my opinion on it. I remember being that, apologies for stealing your nickname here, I remember being that weeaboo trash at 16 and deciding, well, if it's not Japanese, it's not good enough for me, and, all that stupid fart noises. But now I'm like, I will just read it. I give it a chance, and you would not believe some of the most amazing stuff that you could find if you just give it a chance. If you take off your blinkers and say, I'm just going to read this thing.
If you're one of those pizza eating people, like try a really good, I don't know, a really good pasta dish at some point, or maybe like something cold, maybe a really good salad. Like there's so many good mangas out there. Why keep to just one genre or one publisher? I mean, also for if you're a manga creator, I recommend you to not keep to one style and one genre and one category. Like there is so much to learn from horror manga or from shoujo manga or from manga that are more like gags or slapstick manga. Like there's so much you learn from it. And most manga artists don't just read one sort of manga. They read a lot. So that's my rule. Don't read just from one category. That's the rule for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sam knows have a good point. Pizza is the bomb, though. You're correct. You're correct. I still read Shonen Jump. I agree. I'm a huge My Hero Academia fan. Like, it's still good.
Yeah.
It's still good. It just doesn't mean that because pizza's good doesn't mean that, like, risotto is not good. Risotto is also extremely good. It's just also very different. So we have one more question here that we're going to answer real quick. Is it possible to tone without screen tones, like using paint or ink wash to tone pages?
There's a reason why you tone. So I haven't said it before, but good question. The reason why you tone is because it's much easier to print. And especially in Japan, the reason why they started using tone in Japan is because in Japan, they print on very lousy paper when they print these kind of magazines. The Shonen Jump and similar weekly magazines, they're printed on like telephone catalog paper. Is really crappy paper. Like usually the manga magazines in Japan, they're made from old magazines, so they're all recycled like 10 or 16 times, I don't know. So that means the paper quality is so bad. So to be able to make the kind of gray tones look perfect and good, you have to screen tone it. That's why there are these kind of dots, and that's why also I'm talking about you have to keep your manga at 1200 dpi, and then you tone it and you put it in this kind of tone layer that I showed in the program. And that way, when you print it, it's going to look like a gray tone. And you could do that with watercoloring as long as you put it in this kind of gray tone in the computer and you scan it on 1200 dpi and then tone it. But the trick is that I mean, you want the lines to be sharp, you want the tones to be even. There is a reason to all this. It's too much to cram into this episode, but just trust me, if you want it to look like manga and be easy to print, this is the way to go. And the publisher, they really appreciate when you follow the rules, because if you break the rules and you don't know what you're doing, it's gonna be a mess in the actual final publishing step. Don't try to break the rules before you know why the rules are there.
Yeah, because there's usually a very good reason for that rule. And we have had some creators that have gotten cute and tried to break rules or tried to take steps. One big problem that we have is people when they make speech bubbles. They know where the speech bubble is going to go, and they don't bother drawing any art behind the speech bubble. They just leave an empty space. And then, if when we're putting it together, we realize this just doesn't read well, we need to move the speech bubble, well, there's no art underneath it. Or worse, they put the speech bubbles on the same layer as the art, they draw it into the art, and then you can't move the speech bubble. See, again, when we tell you these kinds of things are important, there's a big reason why, and they all will ripple down. So even if it seems like it's a weird extra step that you don't think should be necessary, I promise you, we would not be introducing extra steps if they weren't needed. We would like to get your manga out as quickly as possible too.
As a manga artist, you have to think like not 2 or 3, like 5 steps ahead. Like if your manga ever is going to be published in Japan, it needs to be translated to Japanese. That means all the sound effects that you made in English needs to be able to be translated into Japanese. You have to remove the English ones. If you put them in the picture, like I see people draw them in the actual artwork, that's going to be a mess for you to have to redraw everything. So think 5 steps ahead, and it's going to be much easier for you as a manga artist, and follow these rules, because that also makes you have less headaches. Like I have literally had to retone a 200-page manga because I didn't use the right size, the right DPI resolution. So the whole manga was in 600 and it looked really bad. I had to retone everything into 1200. And 200 pages retoning, that's boring. That's really boring. Don't follow the rules. Like, you're going to have less headache.
Yes,
I promise you.
Agreed. My gosh, guys, we've done it. We have made an entire series about how to make high five, digital high five.
High
five. Thank you so much for sticking with us, guys. Like, it really does mean so much. I mean, we made this for you. There's no point in doing this without you guys. So we're thrilled to have all your great questions. To have you guys show up week after week. Again, any more questions, if you think about something later, if there's something that we didn't go over, send an email. That's kae@tokyopop.com. You can also go to tokyopop.com/manga masterclass, and you will see an archive of all of the videos. We'll also have some sketches from Natalia. We'll also put a link to Runebound both in the description here, and we'll put a link to Runebound on that page as well, so you guys can click through and see it. I highly recommend checking out Sword Princess Amalthea. It is a great 3-book series. You can get it digitally. You can get it in print. It's absolutely gorgeous. You're gonna see a lot of the stuff in action in there. Again, keep reading. Read lots and lots of manga. Pay attention to it. Hopefully, with the tips from these classes, you will start noticing techniques that you've never seen before, which is going to be really useful for you. Natalia, do you have anything else that you would like to plug, or any parting words for our wonderful audience here?
I really hope that as many as possible of you watching will participate in our little contest. And I recommend you that even if the contest doesn't have like huge money or anything as a prize, like the prize is you finishing a manga. Like that should be the main prize. That is what I am aiming for in all competitions I aim for. I don't think I will win ever. I've never won a competition, actually. I've never won a manga competition. I've participated in a lot of manga competitions, but never won it. Sometimes I thought I could win it, but then at some point I learned I don't think that's the aim. The goal is just to make a manga. And that should be your goal too. So just make the manga, participate, even if it's just 1 page, make it. It's going to be fun. I promise you.
If you make a manga, if you, by this contest, if you have a manga to submit, you have already gone 1 step further than me. I've never made a manga. Never. That is a huge achievement. That is something really, really to be proud of. So I really do hope that you take part in that. We are going to put all the details up on our social media. The details will also go up on the Manga Masterclass page on our website. And I will drop a little hint here for you guys. This is not going to be the last you're going to see of me and Natalia on this channel. We have some little sneaky little things in the works that we're going to be planning. So hopefully you guys will be able to see us soon. Again, all of this is going to get announced on social media. We're going to put this all out there. Yeah, stick around, follow us. We hope to hear from you with, books that we've got coming out. We hope to see your submissions. And I hope that at some point soon that we will be publishing some of you guys. That would be amazing.
Yes. Yeah. I want to see a new manga wave. Come on, let's make it.
Yeah, come on, guys. I believe in you. Thank you so much. Everyone, stay safe. Take care. Thank you for sticking with us over these 10 lessons. And we shall see you again soon.
Go vote.
Go vote. Please vote. If you're in America, please vote.
Yes.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.